Hello and welcome to TV on TV. I'm State Representative Tommy Vitolo. You're watching Brookline Interactive Group. Today is Thursday, April 11th, and we have a great show for you today. We have the fourth of 5 consecutive interviews with select board candidates, part of an ongoing series of interviews of all candidates for townwide office in competitive races. You recall we had 3 Brookline Housing Authority candidates. We're now in the midst of the select board conversations. Then we're going to have school committee candidates. Then we're finally going to have an election on Tuesday, May 7th. The polls are open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And you're going to have lots of things to choose from, including, as I said, select board candidates. There are 5 candidates for 2 positions. And so you can make 1 or 2 votes. 2 people are going to win. One of the people who's hoping to win is David Pearlman, currently serving as chair of the school committee. David, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me on, Tommy. I greatly appreciate it.
You know, you've been a guest before in a variety of capacities, mostly focusing on school issues. But for those who haven't seen those shows, and shame on you, for those who haven't seen those shows, tell us a little bit about yourself. What have you been doing your whole life? Let us get under the skin a little bit. What's David really like?
So I am a lifelong Brookline resident. I've been living in Brookline since I was 4 years old, back in 1986. I attended Pierce for preschool. Back then it was called Transition to Kindergarten. I then attended Lincoln School for kindergarten and first grade, and what is now known as the Florida Riffin Ridley School for grades 2 through 8. I then attended Brookline High School for 4 years, stayed local for college, studying at Brandeis University, and then law school at Boston University. I'm a child welfare lawyer. I primarily represent indigent parents and children in cases involving abuse or neglect, cases involving housing instability, substance misuse, domestic violence, and I try to rebuild families where possible or get children into good homes when sadly it's not viable to return children to their biological parents. I have always been very appreciative of the excellent experiences that I've had in Brookline, in particular, my experiences in the public school system, and that has given me a zest for public service and local affairs. So starting in 2013, I ran for town meeting, and I've been in town meeting ever since for over 10 years at this point. Then in 2018, I ran for school committee. In 2021, I was reelected to a second 3-year term on school committee. And for the last 2 years, I've been chair. I live with my wife as renters in precinct 15. We have a 9-month-old son. In my spare time, and there's not a lot of it, but in my spare time, I enjoy rollerblading. And I'm also an avid local sports fan.
So folks, don't adjust your television. It's true, David Pearlman is the better looking of 2 guys wearing dark pinstripe suits, red ties, and dark glasses. So like there's Tommy and then there's the good looking one. We'll get to him again in a second. David, you're chair of the school committee. Now you want to leave that behind and go over to the select board. What gives? Why select board? Why now? Tell us about that decision to run for the select board.
As much as I love serving on school committee and having been chair the last 2 years, a frustration that I've had is the structural deficit. And on the school side, we don't have as much of an opportunity to address the bigger picture budgetary questions about how we can bring more revenue into town. And so that's something that very much interests me because I want to fully fund our schools so that we can have an excellent school system so that we don't have to be making painful cuts year after year. And I feel that on the select board side, I would be able to utilize a lot of the experiences that I've had in executive leadership on school committee and the relationships I've cultivated to try to help expand our revenues so that we can have a much more robust budget, both for public education as well as on the town services side. Because right now it's really difficult to continue to maintain the level of services that we've come to expect and to deserve as a community. And we always want to try to be adding in order to improve the quality of life for our residents. And in order to do that, we realistically need more revenue. I don't want to overly rely on residential taxpayers because they're feeling the pinch. And so I would like to really focus on trying to expand commercial revenue.
So you're not thinking residential taxpayers. I presume you're not thinking parking tickets either. What do you mean when you say expand commercial tax? Do you mean raise taxes on commercial taxpayers now? What do you mean?
I mean, generate more commercial growth by encouraging and creating incentives for businesses to come in so that we have more of them. The MBTCA was a good start, but it's not a finish. And I know that deals more with housing, but certainly I have the expectation that it's going to actually enhance some of our commercial opportunities as well. That's very likely why the Brookline Chamber of Commerce supported the MBTCA. We also have a couple of final frontiers of sorts in Brookline that are ripe for redevelopment. One of those is in my own precinct, Route 9 West, which the Economic Advisory Board is currently looking at. Specifically, they're looking at Hammond Street to the Newton line, which is where the Citizens Bank building is located. And this is opposite Chestnut Hill, the street, which is mostly in Newton, not all of it. The CVS is Brookline, the gas station is Brookline, the parking lot for Star Market and the other shops there, mostly in Brookline. But that's it. The rest of that commercial stretch is pretty much all Newton. And then the Brookline side, we have 1 and 2 story structures, parking lots that are often empty. So I see tremendous growth potential there, in particular for larger commercial establishments. And I think that would really help generate some additional revenue for our town.
And there's even an MBTA stop nearby, the Chestnut Hill T stop, which I think most
Exactly.
people.
And the best type of development is when you're within walking distance of a public mass transit stop, such as the MBTA D line.
And of course,
Because
the 60 bus goes down Route 9 as well, although I think that's less often used than the D
yes.
line.
And then sort of
So-
another major corridor that I think merits a lot of planning in terms of moving forward with commercial growth is Commonwealth Avenue. Not everyone realizes that Commonwealth Avenue on one side from Naples all the way down to St. Mary's is actually Brookline. And similar to Route 9 West, there are a lot of 1 and 2 story structures, parking lots that are often empty. I recognize that Boston University owns several of those parcels, but whether by partnership or focusing first on the parcels that are not Boston University owned, I do think that we could optimize our parcels in that area much better than we are currently.
Well, and as you know, BU is actually the town's largest taxpayer, not pilot payer, but taxpayer, because when they own property that is not used for their nonprofit purpose, they do pay taxes on it. So they are paying taxes on the houses that the deans live in Cottage Farm, and they are paying taxes on those muffler shops now. To the extent that they're developed to be academic use, they would not pay tax. But to the extent that they are developed either for housing or office space or so forth, that would be taxpayer based. And now on my own soapbox, I apologize. When West Station happens and the Throat interstate project happens, there may be real opportunities there. But in the nearer time, it sounds like Route 9 West is far more tangible. And but look, you live down there. To the good folks in that part of the world, would they be welcoming that kind of development? You feel like
I think they very much would
pragmatic?
welcome it. Yes, when I talk to my town meeting delegation, they've expressed frustration that it's the Newton side of the border that seems to be generating all the business. And they would love to have a walkable neighborhood with commercial establishments and housing on top that creates a very natural consumer base for the new businesses that could come in. So they very much want this. And I look forward to working with them and with all stakeholders to make this happen, because we do have some tremendous opportunities there. And where there's a will, there's a way. And I am seeing that a lot of our stakeholders are very much interested in moving in this direction.
And so, you're not thinking that that would actually lower taxes. This is the idea of getting that missing revenue to try to delay the next operating override. Is that where your head's at?
Exactly, yes, because I'm very concerned about affordability in Brookline. As a town, we talk a lot about how we value diversity, and I certainly do, and I believe that the vast majority of us do. But if we really mean that, we cannot continue to raise property taxes and price people out of Brookline and also make it cost prohibitive to move into Brookline. And so it's a very tricky balance because on the one hand, I understand that we do not want to be cutting our level of services. And that's certainly not something that I'm interested in doing. But also, we can't make it so unaffordable that only the wealthy can live here. And so that's why, to the extent that we can avoid having frequent operating overrides, that's very much something that I would want to commit to.
And so commercial tax base, increasing the number of commercial taxpayers, new commercial development would increase the total levy. Any thought on fees, fines, or other ways to get revenue from the folks who maybe should drive a little bit more carefully or remember to pay their meters? Are you thinking we can get money there too, or maybe not so sure?
We could probably get a little bit more, but I don't think it's going to generate the type of revenue that we really need as a town in order to avoid operating overrides. Certainly, repairing broken parking meters and looking at our current fee structures to see if there are other services that we may want to offer on a fee basis, such as composting, for instance. That override did not pass, but we could revisit something along those lines. But I think ultimately what we really need to do is rezone some of our major corridors to encourage new businesses to come in.
So you brought up affordability, and certainly property taxes are, for those who are paying them, a substantial quarterly annual fee. If you got a mortgage, maybe you're actually paying the escrow monthly. What are some other ways you think that on the select board you could impact the affordability of our community?
I do think we need to increase housing production across all price points because right now there is significant difficulty for those who might start off with public assistance. Their economic fortunes rise to a certain level that now they're no longer eligible for where they're living. And then suddenly they have to leave Brookline because they have difficulty encountering homes at a price point that they have now attained. So I'm very conscious of benefits cliffs, and I want to make sure that we incentivize housing across all price points so that people can transition as their income hopefully grows within town so that you don't have to leave Brookline because your economic fortunes have improved. And sometimes even a very modest improvement, and suddenly you're no longer eligible for benefits and you can be priced out. I'm also very excited by Warrant Article 13 for accessory dwelling units, because I think that's another way that we can fairly quickly incentivize cheaper apartments and condo alternatives for those who are in need of perhaps even just a smaller unit in order to be able to remain in town. Also, ADUs would primarily go into our single family areas. So it's a way to provide cheaper housing alternatives all across Brookline. And it has the added benefit that for those who may have a lot of equity in their home, but not a lot of liquidity, it can provide a revenue stream for them so that they can stay in their homes and age in place, which is something that we commonly hear with our senior population in particular.
So ADUs are often called mother-in-law apartments, right? People think of them in that way. The technical term, of course, is ADUs. And when people think of mother-in-law apartments, they don't necessarily really think their own mother-in-law is going to live there. But the implication is that it's a homeowner, and maybe it's a student, maybe it's an older adult, maybe it's a person working at the hospital or sort of in a transition in their own life. The ADU proposed in Warrant Article 13 does not require that it be in the home of someone who owns the home. That is to say, it is possible under the proposal that both the ADU and the house can be rental properties. Is that something that concerns you? Is there any play there?
I think that it's good to maintain both of those options because certainly we don't want to restrict ADUs where it's just the homeowner who could end up pursuing the ADU because that creates, I think, an artificial cap. So I do not have concerns with the current structure of the warrant article.
I want to bounce to schools a little bit. We've got Driscoll that the new school's built, the old school is being torn down, and then there's still some work left. And then Pierce, there's been a lot of paperwork, no physical work yet. Do you feel like the town is in the right place in terms of school expansion, renovation? Are we pointing in the right direction? Do you feel good about where we're at?
I think we're certainly in the right direction. We're going to need to address Baker at some point in the relatively near future because Baker's next in line for improvements, certainly, and for renovation. Baker, the common areas are getting a little tight sometimes because there has been overall enrollment growth at Baker, although not to pre-pandemic levels. But given that geographically, Baker is really the one school south of Route 9 in South Brookline, very far apart from our other schools. And we do have the Hancock Village expansion. We do want to be prepared for a project at Baker. In terms of what Driscoll and the new Pierce are going to be adding, I'm very pleased with both of those projects. I understand that some have expressed concern about Driscoll having several open seats available. I actually see that as a strength because had we built Driscoll only to serve the exact present need, then we would be facing an enrollment crunch in a few years realistically, and then looking at needing to build yet another school in that same general area. I think that we want to pursue school projects bearing in mind that we want these schools to last us at least 50 years, hopefully 75, 100 years. And so you want to future-proof to some extent. Also, when you have available space in a school building, you can bring in special programs. You can also keep more of your special education students in district because currently there are a fair number of students who end up going out of districts because we don't have programs that can necessarily meet their particular needs. And where you have space within a building, you can start a program and be able to accommodate all of our students, ideally locally. And so I don't see that as any kind of detriment. I see that as a plus. And as for Pierce, I am extremely pleased that the building commission, preservation, conservation, as well as parks, that they all voted this through on the meeting of April 2nd. Now it's really in your court with a home rule petition, and hopefully that's going to go through quickly.
Well, we'll see. You know, it's got to get through town meeting first. I expect town meeting will be enthusiastic. I mean, the argument for the geothermal is that it has a lower total cost of ownership than other heating and cooling options. So consistent with your views on affordability and, you know, making sure that the resources we have are used well, it seems like geothermal across School Street from Pierce is consistent with that. So if town meeting passes that permission, it's called an Article 97, then that's right. It comes to the state legislature where it becomes my job and Senator Cindy Cream's job to shepherd a 2/3 vote in both the House and the Senate by July 31st, 2024. And so we're already at work trying to line everything up so it can move through as quickly as we can do it. So, you know, we've talked about the numbers and we've talked about young people a little bit, but as you know, there are plenty of folks in Brookline who are no longer, or not yet, or maybe will never view the public schools as an immediate asset to their family. And they also live in Brookline, and you also want to be their select board member. So what are you thinking about for people in their 20s and even young 30s who don't have kids in the school, for our seniors, for folks for whom just, kids aren't in their cards. What are they going to get out of a select board member, Pearlman?
Well, something that is a high priority for me is renegotiating our pilots to provide access to our residents to some of the amenities that are already within our town borders or just over. We have lots of playing fields that are within Brookline boundaries, but are technically on private property for some of our universities and private secondary schools. And to the extent that we could renegotiate pilots to provide access to our residents to those fields, to the observatory at Dexter, to the tennis courts at Pine Manor, I think that we could very quickly improve the quality of life for our residents of all ages. I don't think that would be a particularly heavy lift. I already have relationships with several members of the boards of trustees and the treasurers at Hellenic College, for instance, at Boston College. And I would talk to them about trying to find ways to make a lot of their amenities available to our town residents.
So there's another candidate for select board who thinks that we should just get them to pay the town money. And you're talking about raising revenue too, but you didn't just say get those folks to pay money. You said there's something that we'd rather have. Is that a distinction worth differentiating?
It is, yes. I don't think we should be going to them for charging them money. Certainly, if they would like to voluntarily provide contributions, as is their right already, they're welcome to do so. But what I would be looking from them more is let us, the residents of Brookline, use your outstanding facilities. Let us go to your observatory at Dexter. Let us play on your playing fields at Pine Manor and at Hellenic. Let us enjoy your tennis courts at Pine Manor. We already have a lot of the facilities that we often talk about wanting as a community. They already exist. If only these private schools would open themselves up to our residents. And I think they would. It takes a conversation, and that is something that I definitely want to pursue. It would be one of my highest priorities. It would cost them nothing directly, and it would cost us nothing. So it really seems like a win-win.
And that's certainly for everybody, but the examples you gave, you didn't mention BU. I think they're fair game too. Most of the examples are South Brookline, and many of those examples were ball fields or things for young people. What about seniors? Are you thinking about anything in particular, either with these pilots or groups, or just more generally? Seniors are a substantial part of town, and what are you thinking about from their perspective?
I would like to see a second senior center, because currently those in South Brookline, there's not a very good connectivity to get to the senior center that's located in North Brookline. We would certainly want to make sure that transportation is provided for them. Cost is obviously a factor, because are we going to have the wherewithal to build another senior center in the near future, given our current fiscal constraints? I do think that a potential path to get there is through public-private partnership. So when looking at the redevelopment of Route 9 West, for instance, perhaps if we can incentivize some of the businesses that would come in or others involved in a mixed-use project to include a senior room, to include facilities that would be dedicated to the seniors of that part of town. I think that's another approach that we could take, and we should be looking for opportunities wherever we can in mixed-use developments to incentivize that type of private contribution for a public benefit.
You're a candidate. That means you're out there campaigning. You got a website?
I do. It's www.electpearlman.com.
That's Pearlman, Pearlman. And how has the campaign trail been treating you? How's that going for you?
I think it's been going very well. I enjoy meeting stakeholders. I'm enjoying going to people's homes and door knocking and talking to my fellow town meeting members to gain their thoughts and perspectives. Because the way I look at it, if I'm fortunate enough to serve the town in the capacity as a member of the select board, I would represent every single one of you, whether you voted for me or not. And I take that very seriously. I think that one of my strengths is I'm someone who looks to unite rather than to divide. And I'm someone who actually reaches out to those who have not supported me to try to bring them on board, not necessarily to like me, but to make sure that they don't feel disenfranchised. Because it's very important to me that we try to work as a team, that we bring everyone together, that we don't look at various initiatives in town in a siloed fashion or as in competition with one another, but as complementary. What I mean by that, for example, there are some who see a tension between comprehensive planning, the housing production plan, the urban forest climate resiliency master plan. And I don't see those as in complete streets. I don't see these efforts as in competition with one another. They're complementary. And if we incorporate elements of them in anything we are doing when looking at land use optimization or analyzing the financial implications and environmental impacts of a given proposal, then we're going to end up with something that's comprehensive and that has a broad base of stakeholder support. And so that's something that I would look to cultivate as a leader on the select board. Bring different groups together, make sure that their particular interests are being addressed in some way, that everyone is contributing so that we have broad-based representation.
David, I want to thank you for taking time. I know you're busy working on behalf of young people throughout the Commonwealth. You're running a vigorous campaign, tons of demands on your time. You've got a beautiful little baby at home. Thank you for taking the time to come on Brookline Interactive Group here on the TV on TV show. Folks, David Pearlman, one of 5 candidates for Select Board. You can vote for 2 on Tuesday, May 7th. Polls are open 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. This is another production here on Brookline Interactive Group. We're on the air every Tuesday and Thursday at 2:30 p.m. And we've got a candidate each and every one of those episodes up through Election Day. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.